Greetings and welcome to Part 5 of our 6-part series, Physician Contracting 101. In this 5th part of our series, we will look at non-compete provisions as well as termination provisions in the contract. Let's begin with the termination provisions. Regarding the termination provisions, a number of times you will need to look at the actual term of the contract. And by this I mean the length of the contract. Typically a contract will set forth whether it's a 1-year contract, a 3-year contract, or a 5-year contract, etc. And then they will have that it will automatically end at the end of that term. Some contracts provide for an automatic renewal period for a 1-year successive or a 1-term successive year or a 2-year or whatever it may be. You need to look carefully at how your contract is structured and understand what the term is and what the renewal policy is for you moving forward. In regard to that, you also need to consider how the contract can end, which is the termination provisions. Typically, this contract will have language that sets forth that either with or without cause provisions that will identify how the contract can be ended. In regard to the without cause provisions, typically you will see a provision that provides that the physician and or the hospital or the physician group can end the contract simply by giving 90 days or 180 days written notice. Why is this provision so important? I think this is crucial, especially to physicians who are moving from out of town to take a job in a new location. Why is that so? Well, you may sign a contract and assume you have a 5-year term within which you're going to work for that employer, and yet in the termination language they could give you a 180-day written notice that they're going to terminate you. So in reality, your 5-year contract is actually only 180 days long. So you really need to be careful. Typically what I like to do in regard to protecting the physicians in these cases is letting the hospital have that provision, but making it so it's not going to be applicable until after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years of service. That way it allows the physician to move and have comfort that the hospital or the physician group isn't going to turn around and terminate the physician within any near proximity of their moving. Similarly, there are the for-cause provisions. You should carefully review these for-cause provisions within your contract. A number of times a contract will have for-cause provisions that are lettered from A through N or A through O or A through P, whatever it may be, which that means there's 14, 15, 16, 17 different provisions under which the contract can be terminated. You should make sure that you understand each and every one of these because you want to know how the hospital or physician group can end your contract. Similarly, you want to make sure that the contract provides that you can terminate the contract if the hospital or physician group are in breach or do certain things against the contract. So you will want to make sure that if it's caused by the hospital or physician group, that you're able to take appropriate action and terminate the contract. So make sure you understand your termination provisions and make sure you understand how they will work, whether they're for cause or without cause, as you move forward. In regard to why that's important, typically upon your leaving, a non-compete provision will come into play. You need to make sure you understand when and how those non-competes will come into play. Typically, a hospital or physician group will want to try to restrict and limit it as much as possible. And you may see language in your contract that says if the physician employee leaves, the non-compete is applicable. We typically try to limit this application and we'll say that if you leave because the hospital terminates you without cause, or if you leave because the hospital or the physician group and you're leaving with cause, caused by them, then the non-compete should not be applicable. We can't always succeed, but this is a concept that you need to explore with your future employer, and the time to do that is before you sign the contract. Similarly, you need to look at what the non-compete actually provides. The non-compete typically looks at a geographic restriction as well as a time restriction. In Iowa, what's been found to be reasonable by the courts is that the time restriction can be up to 2 years. So you will typically see a time restriction on the non-compete of either 1 year or 2 years. If you have a time restriction longer than that, You need to closely look at that and see if that can be negotiated. Similarly, in regard to geographic area, sometimes you will see these restrictions meaning there are going to be so many miles around every clinic or every location of your employer. Some will say simply they're going to be around locations where you've actually practiced. Some are going to say they involve a certain amount of counties within the state of Iowa. Some are going to give just a radius and say within a 50 or 100 mile radius of the local hospital are going to be the restrictive geographic area. Again, you need to make sure you understand what this geographic restriction means, because if you need to leave and the non-compete's applicable, you need to know what your options are for your next future job in the practicing of your profession. So please make sure you understand both the termination and the non-compete provisions, and you will be much happier both in your current contract and in the event that you need to move on and look for another job. Again, thank you for listening, and please join us for our final part, part 6 of this series.